when I'm not punishing 2020 for being the worst year ever by gearing my content towards previous decades.
You know that I'm in love with ladies from the 80s, ladies from the 80s, ladies from the 80s, ladies from the 80s.
I like to answer questions that I get on YouTube, so let's get to it. So I debated if I'm doing a QA this week in light of what's going on in America and across the world. I definitely didn't want to come off as like just another cringy white guy pretending he's like woke or something like that. But then I was listening to a podcast, and again, I'm a professional musician, but my first love and my heart will always be as a basketball player and basketball fan ever since I was a little kid. Growing up, every single one of my heroes without exception was black. And I was actually listening to a podcast with Zach Lowe interviewing Dwayne Casey, head coach of the Detroit Pistons. And they were talking a little bit about race. And the coach was saying that he doesn't even teach his kids that there's black and white, that there's light-skinned and there's dark-skinned, there's different shades of color. And that really brought me back to my childhood and a very seminal moment in just my education as a person. I remember like in first grade, I legit remember this very well. In first grade, my best friend in the whole world was black. Isaac Freeman, shout out. Love that guy. We were best friends for like first through like third or fourth grade or something like that. And I remember, I think it was first grade, when I was told that he was a black person. And I just remember that, and I distinctly remember being like, listen, I just learned the names of my colors. Like, this guy's clearly not black. He's like a medium brown. They had to like tell me that he was black. And then I learned that I was white. And I'm like, hold on a second, I'm not white. I'm more of like a coconut alabaster or something like that. And it just kind of goes to show like the power of language specifically, and how right off the bat we're taught that like black and white is that we're being divided in the most extreme way of a metaphor for color that I think is just like super wrong. And I think it also kind of reminds me of another memory that I had. So again, you know, I didn't really grow up in the most diverse places like West Michigan and stuff, but basketball is always my passion. So my friend groups were always like really diverse, and I just never really thought anything of it. And I remember going and hanging out with my great-grandmother at the time. She was like 100 years old, and she was still like super sound mind. And she definitely grew up in like a different time. And I was watching like the basketball playoffs or something. And she was kind of like watching me watch it, and she seemed kind of concerned or something. And she was asking about like, so when you play basketball, do you play with like the dark-skinned players? I'm like, yeah, great grandma. Because I mean, you know, I think it's not uncommon for like a white person to have like a quote unquote racist like older relative or something like that. So I was just kind of like, yeah, grandma, I do. And then she started asking more kind of like pointed questions, like, she goes, well, when you're done playing with them, do you like hang out with them? I'm like, yeah, like they're like my friends, obviously. And I didn't think much of that at the time, but she was really like pondering my answers to them. And I kind of like, when I'm remembering this interaction, like my great grandma was an awesome person. Like she was like a supreme badass. But I think it just goes to show that like when she was listening to me answer those questions, it dawns on me that she maybe never even had a single interaction with like a person of color in her entire life. And she was like 100 years old. So just me kind of like talking about my experiences, I could see that like the wheels were turning in her head, and she was kind of questioning like a lot of things. And I didn't really realize that till after the fact. So I think what it comes down to is like a lot of white people don't really know what to do right now, myself included. That's why I wasn't even gonna like make a video about this, but I do think that it all comes down to like education, and education is like a huge part of this channel specifically, and I think it's like a huge epidemic, like definitely like a problem in our country and specifically the world. And I know that firsthand from my, you know, when it comes to like me educating myself, I've been educated a lot just recently. Like this last week, I learned that like the Tulsa race riots were a thing. I had no idea those even like existed until this week, and that's like pretty shocking. And then a lot of stuff that like I think I know that I have no idea about, specifically music. I remember like a week or two ago, I said something about the blues being like the most limiting thing, because like in my mind the blues is like, you know, 1-4-5 repeat with variations and stuff like that. And one of the subs actually was like, well, this is kind of an ignorant thing to say. And I'm like, well, is it? Because, you know, it's like the 1-4-5. And then he gave me a bunch of resources Like, we had a good discourse, and he absolutely served me, and what I thought the blues was, and what it became, was just totally wrong. And I thought I knew something, and it turns out, like, I was completely ignorant. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I was coming at it from a position of I know what I'm talking about. And I think that happens a lot of times, all throughout, specifically social media. And again, my whole point is that, like, if you feel like you don't know what to do right now, just educate yourself, because it seems like the school system, specifically in America, are totally failing at this. And I know firsthand, once I educated myself as a musician, because I never had like any kind of like music lessons or anything like that, but learning things myself made me want to share everything that I was learning in a way that was like accessible to me, because I thought that like the way that I finally understood things about music would definitely help other people out. And that was the whole basis for even starting this channel and kind of like giving me this, platform, however small it may be, to even just talk about any kind of sharing of knowledge and stuff like that. So the least you could do is just try to educate yourself on anything. It doesn't even have to be anything super political. I think specifically just like with music, like just take that as an example. Like maybe dive into like a different genre that maybe you're uncomfortable with and just educate yourself. And what I found is through teaching myself, like I feel like I have a pretty good knowledge of how music works. I don't know everything by any means, but I know educating myself to the point that I got, like just like good education is infectious and it's contagious and it all like bleeds together and just kind of like erases a lot of the ignorance in the world. And regardless of what the issue in the world is at the time, I think ignorance and empathy are like the two solutions that you can always kind of work on. So whatever it is, just teach yourself something new. You know what I mean? I feel like at the very least it's something anybody can do. And you can do it for totally selfish reasons, and it might open your mind up to like different things culturally. And I feel like that's kind of like a great way to maybe contribute in the very smallest of ways. Ask 100 random people if they've ever heard of the band Pink Floyd, then ask them if they've ever heard of Sean Daniel. Back to programming as usual. Salty Blues comment of the week. Had a couple good ones this week, comparing my fame to that of Pink Floyd's. So I don't really have a good comeback to that, other than maybe just like the relevance of that comment. Funk. Okay. Study absorbed the playing of Al McKay, Tony Maiden, Leo Nicintelli, even Ray Parker Jr. That's funk. So this was on a video on like how to begin playing funk, like the absolute basics of funk. And again, not to speak contrary to what I just said about education, but it's just funny that they are the gatekeepers of funk. And the concept of funk gatekeepers just like blows my mind. Like, what would they even look like? I kind of want to see what that guy looks like, but I'm definitely happy that they exist. Sean, do you aspire more towards success with your YouTube lessons or towards stuff like this? So this was left as a comment on the original song Hairpins that I put out last week. And thank you, because that song got the best comments of any piece of original music that I've ever gotten before, right? So I appreciate everybody who listened to it. That's definitely like a deeply personal song for me that I think turned out pretty well writing-wise. Definitely, I'd appreciate it if you guys check it out. I'll link it in the description. But as far as like my aspirations, I don't really have any like clear-cut goals. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy YouTubing for sure. The thing that kind of sucks about YouTube is you're not really in control of your destiny, so to speak. It's at the mercy of what YouTube decides to promote, even to your own subscribers, which, I kind of have an issue with, but I also totally understand. So, yeah, I'd like to do more musical projects, and I'll always be releasing them through YouTube. But I think long-term, YouTube will just be like a part of what I'm doing, and then always be, performing and doing other hustles at the same time, because I personally enjoy the variety of them. But, like I said earlier, teaching and education will always, unquestionably, be part of what I'm doing, whether it's through YouTube or anything else. So, just kind of keep doing things. That being said, it's pretty funny because people are, giving me a lot of compliments on like the lyrical content of that last song. When the next song I'm going to be releasing, you already saw a clip of it at the beginning of this video, is absolutely ridiculous. So there's going to be some fire ladies from the 80s content coming very soon that I'm probably going to start teasing on Instagram when it's appropriate. So make sure to be ready for that. I have a question, Sean. I took lessons as a child, 12, and learned on a classical guitar fingerpicking. Only later, in order to impress the ladies, I started playing steel string. I recently tried nylon again. Now I'm torn between the two. I have saved enough to buy one quality guitar, and I can't figure it out. Is there one or the other that kind of eases over the scales into the other's wheelhouse? Great question. I am definitely very biased. I feel like I'm a steel string player all the way. I love nylon string guitars. I have a couple really nice Cordoba ones that I don't really play as much as I do the steel strings, just because I feel like at my core I'm more of like a singer-songwriter than a specific kind of guitar player. And I always think that the blend of a steel string guitar with like a person's voice just kind of seems more appropriate, traditional, whatever the response is. I think just like the dynamics, the frequency range of a well-balanced acoustic guitar like this D'Angelico or the Taylor GA3 that I have, I think is kind of just perfect to kind of do in some kind of singer-songwriter vibe. But that being said, you know, there's a million advantages of having a nylon string guitar. So, you know, it just really depends on what you're into. I can't really answer the question, but I do think that practically a steel string guitar probably has, I don't know, it's probably more prevalent across more genres. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm super ignorant on that like I am a lot of things, but that's my answer. For listening homework, I'm going to throw you to some From the Basement sessions the Queens of the Stone Age just released. This one's pretty great. Again, it's a great song. It's a rockin' song. I definitely recommend you checking it out. It's one of my favorite heaviest Queens riffs. So good. But specifically, the bass player doing the screaming parts of the songs just cracks me up endlessly. And I'm a sucker for content that I can enjoy legitimately and ironically at the same time. And every time the bass player does the scream in this, it absolutely sends me. So check that out. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, or the website, and I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot.